Welcome, Parsha's Teruma, Moshe Taragin, for OU All Parsha in the OU Center in Yerushalayim. I have a little bit of a layover, and I decided to come to the OU Center. There's a nice quiet room, OU logo. So some Torah for Parsha's Teruma. Every part of the Mishkan, of course, is iconic. And kelim are not just vessels that have instrumental or logistical purpose, but there's deep, deep symbolism and iconography, both in the Klei HaMikdash and the Big Day Kahuna, next week's Parsha, Parshas Tetzaveh themselves, as well as in the details, where they are located, what are they composed of, what are their dimensions, what is included, how are they crafted, miksha or non-miksha. So it's a hard parsha because unless you're a mathematician, most of us aren't, just get the math down, and unless you're an architect, to imagine where everything was. There are great tools and websites and sheets and pictures to help, and I recommend all of them. But the most iconic is, of course, the Aron Hakodesh, holding the luchos, holding a Sefer Torah, depending upon which shita, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the makom of the avodas Yom Kippurim, obviously. And when the Torah describes the construction of the Aron, as opposed to the description of the Shulchan, v'asisa Shulchan, she crafted a Shulchan, v'asisa Menorah, and of course it's directed not at one person. I can't imagine one person built the menorah, but they singular because there was a team of craftsmen and artisans. The Torah describes the construction of the Aron, v'asu Aron atzei shitim. And Chazal's drush is Yavo hakol v'yasku b'Torah. Being that the Aron signifies Torah, it contains Torah. The zer zahav saviv, the protruding tiara or crown around the Aron, Chazal uses a symbol for Keser Torah. Keser Torah award is always handed out at some point around Parshas Teruma. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the construction of the Aron to be communal, so that Torah study is universal and panoramic rather than focused and telescopic. Yavo hakol v'yasku b'Torah. Everyone should come and learn Torah, and to convey that message, everyone should come and build the Aron. I can't imagine that technically there was a difference between how many people hammered out the menorah or produced the Shulchan and how many people hammered out the Aron and plated the Aron with gold and wood. So I don't think at a technical level, the Asu incorporates more people into the construction process, but it frames it as collective, even though it wasn't. It was a team, and that same team that presumably built the menorah and built the Shulchan and built the Mizbeach, but it's framed as a communal project because Torah is a communal responsibility. So what does that all mean? Yavo hakol v'yasku b'Torah. What are the deeper messages beyond just the saying and the phraseology? It's a nice phrase, but what does it really mean? How does it affect our view of Torah? So I think there really are two issues that hit me first and foremost. The first issue is that Torah is not only mandated from the clergy and the Rabbanim and the Talmidei Chachamim. Part of what makes Yiddishkeit so robust and so empowering and grants our avodas Hashem such depth and heft is that every single person is expected to encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu by direct reading of His Word or its interpretation by our Masarah. To us, it's a given because we were all raised that way. The Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. But if you think about it, it's not so obvious. And if you compare it to other religions, it's not true. Other people are not expected to analyze their religious experience, be it at the general level of faith or the specific detail of practice and behavior. At most, they're asked to believe. At most, they're asked to follow a set of rules and guidelines. But study and thought and analysis and depth, those are reserved for the clergy. Those are reserved for the men of the cloth, the men and the women of the cloth, who are meant to dedicate their lives to studying the text and the meaning behind the text. What does it mean for Torah, as the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be expected from every single person? The Gemara in Shabbos says on Chaf Aleph that when you get to Shemayim, I think the second question, the third question you ask, after you're asked about ethics and morality, is Kavati item laTorah? Did you set aside significant time for Torah study? Beis Shammai says, Asay Torah schakeva. So not every individual has the luxury to spend Shifti B'veis Hashem Kol Yemei Chayai, and as we say, burn the midnight oil every night learning Torah. But commitment to Talmud Torah, interaction with Talmud Torah, investment in Talmud Torah, everyone has to answer that question, not just the Rabbanim. It's not demanded only of the men of the cloth and the rabbis and the halachic authorities. And it first of all, it did wonders for Jewish literacy rates, because throughout history, Jewish literacy rates surged beyond the general population's literacy rates, which unfortunately was very deflated. And it granted us tremendous leverage and advantage in commerce, in the legal field, and anything, tax collection. It was a great, of course, the purpose of studying Torah is not so that we can become literate in a non-literate world. That's just a byproduct, a historical byproduct. But religion is not voodoo, and it's not mystical only. Obviously, there are mystical elements to it, and it's not just arbitrary, but it's you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu encountering each other through studying His Word and through implementing that Word. So Yavo HaKol v'yasku b'Torah v'asu li Aron atzei shitim means that every single person is obligated to study Torah. And of course, women aren't obligated. And there were times in history in which women could build a relation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through non-interaction with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Word. Many people, like myself, and I imagine the OU, I think there are several female Torah initiatives in the OU, as far as I know, believe that in this era, based on all sorts of changes which are well beyond the scope of this year, women should be exposed to frontal textual learning and not just ideas and identity shaping. But because how can you not grant them this access to the Word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is so seminal and vital for religious identity? So that's the primary message of the Asu li Aron Yavo HaKol v'yasku b'Torah. But then there's a second message, and it's equally important, and it's a delicate issue. Well, let's talk about the delicate issue. My Rebbe, Rav Amital, had a series of lines that he would repeat throughout the years, quick one-liners. And anyone who spent time with Rav Amital, I'm putting out a sefer on Rav Amital in a few weeks from when this recording will be heard, so a little bit of promo. I really want people to have a better appreciation of who he was and what his Torah was. So one of his famous lines was, Ein monopol l'Torah. There is no monopoly on Torah. No one has domain. No one has eminent domain and control and exclusive rights, and doesn't exist. So what does that mean? So what it means intellectually is one thing. What it means culturally is a separate thing. So let's talk about this Ein monopol l'Torah theory, that everyone owns Torah. That's right, everyone builds the Torah. They have equal share, at least in theory. Only every single person had hand in building it. It's not like running a sefer Torah, everyone got up and put a little piece of chip of a wood into the Torah. It doesn't mean that they saw it that way. They were maybe watching, they were invited to watch. I don't know what it meant practically. It's a message. It's not a metaphor, not necessarily an actual prescription for how to build the Torah. It'd be chaos if everyone built the Torah. What do they call a horse built by committee? A camel. So there has to be one concentrated, coordinated effort. So intellectually, it means as follows. Sometimes you'll have people, when describing the way they learn, let's say a piece of Gemara or anything, but obviously Gemara is the most complicated and complex and needs the most strategy and strategizing, they'll say, this is the derech halimud. This is the way to learn Shas. That's an embarrassing statement, and it's a morally objectionable statement. And I tell Talmidim who hear that statement to walk out the door on that statement. Not literally, don't embarrass someone, but not to take that statement seriously. Torah is infinite. There are millions and millions of, literally, it's the word of Hashem, so it goes beyond human intellect. Let me give you an example which I often quote. I teach in yeshiva that's associated with the brisker derech. And the Brisker Derech, I just spoke about Reb Chaim the last 2 days in Shir, worked really hard to create categories. What is Kiddushin, and what is Gittin, and what is a Kinyan, and to use both the Gemaras and the Mishonim, and in some cases Achronim, to build those categories. Just quoted Reb Chaim today, one of my favorites. So I don't often cite the Marsha. Marsha was involved in a completely different aspect of the Sugya. The Sugya is endless, like an ocean. He had his island. It's very hard to integrate what he was involved in into my general work on the Sugya. You could count probably on 2 hands the amount of Marshals I've taught in the last 30 years, honestly. But you know what happened if Marshal walked into that door? I turned the camera, but then I'd ruined this. Marshal walked in the door, rolling his dust, because he knew Torah thousands of times better than I'll ever know it. And I wish I had 1,000 lifetimes in which I could study Torah, both the way that my Rebbe Rav Aron taught me, and then I can learn Torah the way the Telzers taught, and I can learn Torah the way that Pilpulisha. I don't have that much time, so I have to conduct triage, and with the limited time I have, what's the way that I feel most comfortable, intellectually, spiritually, whatever you determine it, to encounter HaKadosh Baruch Hu's word. So there's a chiluk. If the Rebbe says this is my derech, that's great. That Rebbe is saying, there are many drachim out there, but based on all the factors, I think this is the best way to tackle a sugya with limited bandwidth, limited time. The derech, it's a shameful statement. The derech halimud? Are you kidding me? The derech halimud? I'm laughing when I'm saying it. Same thing with hashkafa. The hashkafa, the derech ha'emes. Come on. Hashem is infinite. No human mind can fully encompass HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all just partial truths that we're carving together and clustering together and cobbling together to understand the infinite. Whoever says this is my derech to live life by, this is how I see HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how I process avodas Hashem, that's wonderful. And if you feel drawn to it, follow it. But the derech, that's a whole different story. That's a very, very inappropriate statement. I mentioned the Aron before, and I mentioned how the dimensions are so important. So one of the phenomena about the dimensions of the Aron is that all the dimensions are fractal. V'yasu Aron atzei shitim, amasayim v'chetzi arko, 2.5 amos tall. V'yama v'chetzi rachbo, and 1.5 amos wide. V'yama v'chetzi komaso, so 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5 height. Why was the Aron built in fractions? Why fractions? You'd expect it to be a perfect cube or a perfect square. It's the Aron. It should have symmetry. It should be elegant, aesthetic. Many different answers to that question, but one of them is because the Aron is the metaphor for human beings who try to contain Torah and house Torah and incorporate Torah, so the Aron houses the Torah. And any human construct to house Torah, let's say symbolized by the Aron, will only be partial. It cannot be complete. And building an Aron that is complete and perfect and square suggests that you can build yourself into an Aron, and this is the perfect way to contain Torah. And I'm always laughing because you're trying to capture something infinite and eternal through human constructs. It's just incompatible. You're doing your best, and this is the best you can come up with. So my Rebbe's statement, Ein monopole l'Torah, there's no monopoly for Torah, has an intellectual facet to it. That as much as you try to strategize and conceptualize, you don't just learn Torah randomly, line by line. You try to articulate and conceptualize it and abstract it and categorize it every derech. But there's also a cultural element to the Ein monopole l'Torah, and that I think is the most sensitive issue about this entire shir. It's an important issue to put on the table. Torah is cosmic, Torah is eternal, Torah is beyond time, Torah is beyond place. It was given in a desert. We don't really know the day it was given, all that. But when human beings start to study Torah and apply themselves to Torah, there's what I call a culture that surrounds at certain points in history. Sometimes it doesn't develop, sometimes it does. But at a certain point in history, in a given location, based on the groundswell of Torah's success, it can become a culture associated with Torah. And that culture is reflected in various cultural expressions of dress and behavior and speech and marriage. And people that learn Torah start to become very similar in their not just when they're sitting and learning a piece of Gemara or learning a Tosfos, but how they live life as a person who studies Torah, as a Ben Torah or Bas Torah. There's no Ben Torah or Bas Torah. It was different in Turkey in the 17th century, and it was different in Spain in the 13th century, and it was different in Egypt. But at certain points in history, there's a morphing, a cultural shell that builds or grows around Torah. And then people are facing an interesting question. How much to submit to that coding and culturing, and how much not to? And if you submit to it, then you're drawing from the energy and the passion of people who have jointly committed and expressed their common enterprise, not just through the Daf Gemara that they learn, but through all sorts of culturally similar moments. And it's powerful, and it's instructive, and it's binary, and it's clear, and it's obvious. But then you're submitting the eternity of Torah and the eternal truths of Torah to a certain view and way and stance and look, and any culture will narrow, because people, when they cluster together, when they huddle together, they create a commonality that eliminates or excludes ideas that lie beyond the orbit of their common knowledge and common thinking. Groupthink is always going to be narrowing. So do you join the group? Do you not join the group? Do you become part of the group or not become part of the group? And sometimes it's not just a personal question, but people can actually believe that if you're not part of the group, then your Torah really isn't real Torah. And I obviously don't believe that. And this whole conversation should be obvious to you. We are at an extremely, extremely meaningful and inspiring moment in history. And again, I have to keep saying this. Put all the army issue on the side right now. My kids have 7 kids that serve in the army. Don't worry. You know what my opinion is about the army. But I'm not willing to just dismiss everything that's been accomplished in the world of Torah by a culture that doesn't serve in the army simply because I disagree with that position. So let's, if you're a pro-army supporter, don't be alienated by the fact that I'm ratifying or validating parts of that community. Of course, if you are non-army participant, I'm not dismissing it. It's just put it all on the side. Let's go back to 2022 before it became an extremely, extremely poignant and pressing moral and theological issue, and which it is. I'm not in any way dismissing it, but it can't be the boogeyman. It can't be the elephant in the room that every time we talk about our cultures and different cultures, that becomes the conversation closer, a conversation ender. And over the last, let's call it 200 years, depending on how you started and how you gauge it, there's been this illustrious saturation of Torah and intensification of Torah commitment and creativity of Torah, very unprecedented. You have to go back maybe to Spain of the 13th century. It hasn't happened too often, this degree of Talmud Torah. I never like to glorify the past, and every generation is just a pale image of the previous generation. It's not true. You have to go back a long, long, long ways to find this degree of Torah scholarship, maybe not, and the spread of Torah. It's obvious. It should be obvious to everyone. I don't have to make that point. And what has happened is there's become a culture surrounding people who have dedicated themselves to Talmud Torah, many of the people, and people call it the Olam HaTorah, the Elam HaTorah, the Torah Welt, the Yeshiva Welt, and that comes with coding and dress and language, yeshivish language, and behavior, and everything around. There's no halacha for shidduch. That's just the way the culture has developed shidduchim. You can slice shidduchim in a million different ways. But this is the way that world lives. And you have to make a personal decision. And that personal decision is, well, if you're part of that world, you draw from the energy. But if you're part of that world, you also limit your, not just your mind space, but your view of Torah. Torah is being shoehorned into a certain cultural moment and cultural positioning that's become very powerful because of its success, but it could be a product or not a casualty, but it can become limited by its own success. And it's a personal issue that everyone has to gauge for themselves. Obviously, I don't teach in Lakewood. I'm happy to come give a share, so if anyone out there in Lakewood is listening, I love to come give share. So I'm happy to get on a plane to give share. So there's a little bit of a cheap solicitation, but seriously, I don't teach in Lakewood. I don't teach in the Mir. And I think a lot of people would say, the fact that he doesn't live his life by this coding or that coding. I have a TV in my house. I get like two channels and horrible channels. But if you have a TV, you can't be a Torah personality in a certain world, which is not expected of you. And so many other things. I'm not going to start throwing out my dirty laundry, what I do, what I don't do. But I don't take those codes. And I just try to live my life as an Oved Hashem based on my own intuition, the sorrows that I have from the people that I learn from. It doesn't always dovetail with where the yeshiva world is at, as people refer to it. But it is important, if you are listening to this in Lakewood, and you do care about what I say. First of all, I don't know why you care about what I say, but let's say you do care about what I say. Not to see Torah that way and view it as hitched or shrunken by the culture that's made it great. It's okay, well, you've made a decision to be part of that culture. You were educated in that culture, and it comes with tremendous passion and strength and motivation and communal pressure, not pressure, but communal development. But there's something larger than Torah, and you could be, I don't mean this to be in any way, shape, or form racist or ethnocentric. You could be an Iraqi Jew just sitting somewhere in the middle of nowhere learning Torah, and you don't come from the yeshiva Welt, and you're a Sephardi Jew, and it also works. It also makes sense. And in some ways, it's a fresh encounter with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world. So, Yavo HaKol V'yasku B'Torah means, number one, everyone has to learn Torah. It's a mandate. But also, Torah isn't controlled by one group. It's not controlled by one strategic, intellectual approach, conceptual approach, derech halima, derech hashkafa. And also when there's a culture that starts to barnacle itself, it's a great, I was thinking about that word, I'm just a little tired, but to barnacle itself around Torah. So barnacle is something extra. Dressing in a white shirt, I just happen to be dressing in a white shirt today, but dressing in a white shirt and black pants is not part of Torah. Wearing a black hat isn't part of Torah. The Rambam didn't wear a black hat, but that's the accepted minhag that many people who care about Torah have adopted, and therefore, you can say once they've adopted it, it gets certain sanctity because I'm not getting to that part right now, but it's the barnacle. It's surrounding Torah. It's with people who are interested in Torah. A lot of them express themselves and present themselves. And you say, well, therefore, I want to be part of that. And a lot of people are part of it. And then there's another approach that says you're standing at Har Sinai, and Har Sinai is something eternal, and you don't want there to be an interface, and you don't want there to be a code, and then you suffer. You suffer maybe the lack of infusion that you get from just surrounding yourself with so many people who, by their nature, tend to at least conforming expressions surrounding the expression of Torah. So that's Parshas Teruma. I'll try to do one more here. How much time I have? Shabbat Shalom.